Well, before we get out of here, let's chat about NWA Powerrr, Episode 2. We're not going to go all the way through it here, but as a follow-up, I thought this one, last week you had the novelty of here's this present under the tree that you get to unwrap and see what it is. And now today, or this week, was Boxing Day, where you're playing with the toy, but it's 24 hours later. How did this toy perform on week 2, Way?
I'm still quite enamored with the toy. It has not lost its freshness to me after 1 week. If anything, I found myself craving it more. I actually watched this after AEW Dark, and I found myself more excited and more engaged throughout this hour than I was with AEW Dark. I mean, if you're trying to compare the two.
I only watched the Janela match with Omega. I didn't watch the whole thing. I just don't need a whole hour of AEW. Like, if it's a hot match, I'm going to seek it out. But yeah, you're right. Like, this to me is the easiest hour to watch of wrestling each week. Powerrr.
Yeah, and I was a fan of the way they counted down the show, because as you know, this starts at 6:05 on the YouTube, and that's why they have like a little highlight reel of all the great tweets, all the buzz that was out over the past week, just kind of really putting themselves over and giving you the sense that this was a talked about show, including, of course, a tweet from various wrestlers, including The Rock. So that's how it started off. As Dave Lagana mentioned in your interview, John, he's editing the opening, like re-editing the opening every single time. I guess I didn't really notice. Like, I guess every single week it features the performance that you're about to see, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that was something. I really loved, seeing Ricky Starks and Trevor Murdoch. Trevor Murdoch, to me, is a name that has fallen the face of the earth for me personally, but I think is fucking perfect. Like, feels like he belongs on this particular show.
A baked potato with arms and legs, as Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette had some great lines throughout
He's
this.
also perfect on this show. Like, this show would not be as successful or as good without Jim Cornette. And I thought Ricky Starks really took the opportunity to come out onto the scene and I thought, to me, he really impressed on the microphone. In ring, I kind of look at him as, at least at this point, kind of like a lot of other maybe people of a similar style. But on the microphone, he really stood out to me as something special.
Yeah, he to me represents that kind of young upcoming talent, and a lot of these guys, it's like the matches are very quick. It's just more so to get some moves over, to get a flavor of their style, but then the real main event is afterwards when they get to speak, and that's what they're hanging their hat on, and it's different. And the promos on this show were solid. From Ricky Starks onward, we had James Storm out here, and you had a wide variety. Homicide and Eddie Kingston are such a great contrast to everyone else. Last week, we had the whole show build up to a title match. This week, the main event that they built up to throughout the whole show was a sit-down interview with Nick Aldis and what kind of questions Joe Galli was going to ask him. That was what the whole show built itself around.
It was
an interview.
Yeah. It was very simple, and I thought it was, probably felt very old school to just center your hour about hearing what this person might have to say. And they teased it with a TMZ style interview beforehand with Nick Aldis after the interview, showing out a sequence where he was simply not happy with the line of questioning. So it makes the story, I certainly have a lot of intrigue. I also want to comment on a lot of these post-match promos and just the interviews at the desk, they have such a loose feel to them. And I mean that specifically with something like Colt Cabana introducing Mr. Anderson, who, when they announced Mr. Anderson, I was I still remember him from Impact. My opinion of him isn't all that strong. But again, I think a setting like this paints everybody with a fresh coat of paint. And I thought he and Cabana, for the brief interaction that they had, it felt really loose, and I thought it felt interesting. They were finishing, or Cabana was finishing his catchphrases. You could tell it was just a non-scripted kind of interaction. And I felt the same way even about Aaron Rex, or what's his what did they call him? Aaron Stevens.
Aaron Stevens, yeah.
Aaron Stevens, where When he came out, I was like a little bit shaky. Like, I don't know how I feel about like all these kind of ex WWE, ex TNA guys like showing up on this particular show. But when they started talking, I got the sense that I was seeing a different version of them than what I saw previously. So I'm at least interested to see what they have to offer.
Yeah, I wanted to single out. I really thought Allison Kay and Ashley Vox. I enjoyed this. Like there were no matches on here that I'd say you absolutely have to go see. It's more so the presentation. But Allison Kay, I thought she carried herself so well as the women's champion. Like I've always seen a lot in whether she was Sienna or Allison Kay, but it really, this setting worked for her. They got Ashley Vox over and she got several near falls, but then ultimately she falls to the champion. And then the post match after, like it wasn't your screaming promo or anything from Allison Kay. She brought Ashley Vox over and pretty much explained that you've got a great future, but you're not ahead of me yet. And it got Vox over as someone to watch, but Allison Kay is your top champion. And I thought I really thought that came across very well. That was one of my favorite things on the show, was that whole thing.
I agree with you. Like, seeing her speak, and I think her presence on the microphone, you could tell why they wanted to put the belt on her. She definitely felt like a leader. So I agree with you. I have to say though, my favorite.
Go ahead.
My favorite.
I know what you're going to say.
My favorite thing on this show, and I can't believe we forgot to mention it in our first review of last week. They have commercial breaks in NWA Powerrr, and I don't know who's producing these, but they are making my week every single time one of these comes out. It's these like really like old school, like cheaply produced local television ads starring like legendary wrestlers. And last week we had Austin Idol's wrestling school, which I'm led to believe is an actual wrestling school.
It is a real wrestling school.
But the way like these are edited is just like something out of Tim and Eric, something out of like Mr. Show, as like campy and ridiculous and as entertaining as any of those things might produce. This week we had Tony Fox waffles and tire irons. Tony Fox has become an expert while on the road in his career on two things: waffles and tire irons. And he's opened up a brand new shop where he sells organic waffles and gold painted tire irons. Like, I'm not doing it justice, everybody. Like, at the very least, if you're going to check anything out, check out these ads.
I wasn't crazy about the Austin Idol one last week because I thought it was too campy for this show. And it almost made it too much like the Southpaw regional wrestling.
But it was a commercial. Like, this is not...
I understand. I just... Like, it wasn't my favorite thing last week. This week, that Tony Falk ad, I just thought it was awesome. I loved it so much. I didn't know where this thing was going. He's got a tire iron. He's pushing waffles. And I was a big fan this week, and I don't know what the big difference was, but it really worked for me this week. And last week, it's right. It's like it's totally divorced from the program.
It's non-canon. It's like it's the place where you would like imagine popping in an old tape and seeing like classic commercials that you've totally forgotten about or have never seen before. I feel like that's the mood that it was going for, and it's sort of it's exactly what it provides.
I feel it's also something where you could do this with a bunch of legends, and then the pay-per-view, it's like they're guests of honor or something, and you could actually do something where it's focusing on some of these names. And speaking of the pay-per-view, at the end of the show, they did confirm that the pay-per-view will be called Into the Fire on Saturday, December 14th at 6:05 Eastern in the same location in Atlanta.
I think certainly in contention for best opening theme song for a wrestling program this year is Dawkins' Into the Fire. Really, it's really great pick.
So there you go. That was NWA Powerrr. A really fun episode this week, following up on last week's debut.